Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me in this channel and podcast interview with Mr. Lonnie Whitehead. He's a TV celebrity and a very well-known realtor, one of the best in the DC and Virginia market. So I just wanted to share and just talk to him about the current state of the market, what he's seeing in terms of what's changed from the last few years to now. I think we're entering into the fall of 2022. And so just pick his brain on what he's seeing, what advice he has for some of you guys. So Lonnie, can you just please share about you, how people can find you, and a little bit about your background?
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Lonnie Whitehead. I actually work with KW Metro Center. That's my brokerage. My website, dcandvahomes.com, is really easy to remember. At least I think so. But DC and VA like Virginia, homes, HOMES.com. So I actually started my career in the real estate industry in 2007, right before the crash. And so when I started then, I recall a lot of friends and colleagues when the market was crashing was like, this is the worst time for you to get started. Why don't you just quit, give up? Like, what are you going to do? And my thought was, if I can survive this market, during that crash, when the market recovers, I'll be able to just coast through. And so it was one of the best decisions I ever made to continue to do the real estate business. And one of the reasons that I actually started was not just to think about my retirement and ways to kind of diversify my investment portfolio and things like that. It was more so to help people, because I remember my first time buying a home. And so I wanted to help people, to kind of help give them a better experience with buying a home and making sure that they're educated and making sure that they feel comfortable with that purchase, because it's a big purchase. It's at least a 30-year commitment for most people who do a 30-year mortgage. You could obviously, there's so many different loan options, but it's a big commitment. And so I just wanted to make sure people were comfortable and I could give them that great experience.
So you said you started in 2007. So how did you survive through that? I mean, because the subprime meltdown, and I mean, were there people even looking to buy homes when the market price, the home prices were plummeting, and people that we thought were being able to qualify for home and home financing, a large portion of those folks kind of just disappeared, right? Because the programs disappeared. So what did you do to kind of pivot immediately as a newcomer? Because I'm sure you're experiencing it now, and now you're on the other side where you're a veteran, you have longevity in the industry. But back then, being green, having not done any transactions, what did you do to separate yourself and kind of put a name out there?
So that's a great question. I think what really helped me, I have to give credit to the broker that I was working with, Paul Wallace. I started working with him. He actually recruited me over to his company. Started working with him, and so he kind of showed me how to really focus on finding listings and also working with investors, because the 2008 crash, it really created an opportunity. It created an opportunity for investors because property values really dropped. So now it costs less to acquire properties. It also worked for buyers who weren't investors, because lenders they had more restrictions on qualifying you for the loan. But if you were qualified, it was a great time for you to buy. So yeah, definitely that market, that crash did affect a lot of people in purchasing. It obviously affected a lot of owners at the time too, that may have been taken advantage of by some companies, because there were a lot of lawsuits from different lenders that had bad practices, right?
The bustometer.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it created opportunity. And so working with investors and, buyers that were qualified, it was that perfect time to find a property at a much lower value.
Do you see similarities from back then to now? Because I mean, while I think the guidelines have stayed pretty much similar post meltdown to now, maybe a little bit stricter in certain, I want to say offshoot products, like cash out for HELOCs and stuff, or those LTV ratios have dropped from 95, 90 to now like 85, 80. So like a piggyback loan, doing a SIMO first and a second, are kind of like not really in question anymore. But do you feel like there are similarities? Because I mean, to your point, in '07, if you qualified for a loan, that means you didn't have that much competition, right? Because you qualified, and those folks that were qualifying with all these subprime loans, those are out of the market. So the competition pool to buy a home is less. And now with the higher rates, I'm going to guess competition is less as well. Like, you don't see people around the block waiting for an open house anymore, do you?
Yeah, it's another great question. So it's tricky. This current market, there's similarities to the previous, I guess, the big change, because it's a different, we're not in a crash yet, right? 2008 was a crash. But there's similarities in the two, when you look at the two. From my experience from then to now, there's not as much competition now, but there still is, okay? In 2008, that crash, the competition was really, really low. So you could be a lot more aggressive with your offer. So if there was a property on, whether it was a foreclosure or not, we definitely had more foreclosures and short sales back then. Now we don't have a lot of foreclosures and short sales for a couple of reasons. One, the foreclosure moratorium that banks couldn't foreclose for a long period of time. So there's a backlog. There's essentially, we'll probably see it down the road. We'll see, but there was a lot of foreclosures, and even with those foreclosures, you could be aggressive with the banks with your offer, and people who weren't in foreclosure, again, there wasn't a lot of buyers, so you could be aggressive. Now, you still can't be as aggressive because there's still some competition. It's really interesting. Earlier this year, when interest rates were low, you couldn't think about coming in below asking price. You would have to come in at asking or above if you wanted the property. Now that interest rates are higher, you can come in at asking price on some properties. You might be able to come in a little bit below, might be able to get some closing costs, but I can tell you there's still competition. Just recently I had a situation where we put in an offer. We knew we were going to be competing. We came in above asking. The other offer, I guess once they knew there was another offer involved, they went all cash, removed all contingencies, no appraisal, no home inspection, no financing. So even though they were lower than our offer,
even though it's October of 2022.
Say what now?
Even though it's October of 2022, they did an all cash offer, no contingency.
October 22, all cash, no contingencies. I'm
Wow.
not 100% sure if they were lower. I won't know until settlement, but I believe we were higher. But with no contingencies, they were the better offer, even though we were above asking. So you would think with high interest rates, we would have won that easily, but that's not the case.
So it's not over yet.
It's
The
not over yet.
competition is still there.
Competition is still there.
Do you think that's primarily contributed to there's still an inventory shortage, or do you think it's contributing to something else that most people in as a home buyer is not aware of?
So there's two things. There is still an inventory shortage. That is absolutely correct. But also, it's one of those situations where when the interest rates started to go up, some people started to pull back. I had clients that said, we need to wait, these higher interest rates is going to adjust the amount of home we can buy. So we need the prices to drop a little bit, right? Which is understandable.
Yeah.
So some people took a step back, took a pause, but as the interest rates keep going higher, now some of those people are saying, we need to buy now before they go even higher.
Yeah.
So it's like they took a pause. You fast forward just a couple months, and it's like the feds are still going up. So now it's bringing people back out just to go ahead and try to purchase something, and then hopefully refinance later.
Yeah, for sure. Because I've had folks where, I can just vividly remember in January of this year of 2022, it started to go out of the twos into the threes, and the buyers were like, oh my God, the rates are so high, I cannot buy a home. I'm just going to wait for it to come back down. And they just weren't understanding that these were historic lows, like never before seen. 30-year fixes depending on the product in the ones or the low mid twos, and so they were like, no, it's going to come back. I'm going to wait until it comes back down. And then all of a sudden, threes, fours, fives, and now, to your point, I'm starting to see people come back when it's in the sixes and sevens because they're saying the same thing. It's like, I need to buy a house. Like, they've kind of, managed their expectations in terms of what they think they were going to get now. So it's a little bit smaller home or maybe a different location. But I think also it contributes to certain areas. There are pockets where they are, and we are seeing on the contract where they've negotiated either asking to your point, or the thing that I'm noticing a lot more these days is seller concession or seller credit. Instead of lowering the price, the seller is kind of willing to offer up something and to offset the closing costs or something so that it can just alleviate some of the purchasing pain that current buyers are going through. Is that kind of like what you're seeing as what you're saying? Like, do you see more price negotiations or more seller credit, seller concessions to help with closing costs?
I'm seeing more seller credits. I mean, the sellers are getting creative because they don't want their property sitting on the market long because they don't want the price drops. So right out the gate, they're letting you know we're offering, 10,000 towards your closing costs or 5,000 towards your closing costs. And now, because of the interest rates, they will say we're offering, interest rate buy down. So it's giving people different creative ways to help them afford that mortgage, right? So I'm seeing that right out the gate versus a buyer having to see what is the seller willing to give me. The sellers are saying, this is what I'm willing to give you. Come buy my home now. So, yeah.
Is that it? So if a seller came to you today, let's say they watched this video and they're going to come to you, like, what's that one, I guess, package? I wouldn't say one advice, but one package of advice that you would tell the seller, because you're a pretty active buying and listing agent in the DC and VA area. So, like, what's that advice? Like, okay, it's October. They're planning to sell their home in November, December, maybe even through January. Like, how would you position it so that they're positioned for success and they're not, their home is not on the market forever? Like, what would you tell them?
So that's a really good question. The package advice I would give is, one, price your home according to the market. So many times I see some sellers that believe their home is worth a certain amount, and that is understandable. There's a lot of emotion that comes with that home. There's a lot of history. So we may value things with that at a much higher point, right? But the market doesn't lie. And so as a realtor, I'm going to show you the data that lets you know this is what the market is saying your home is worth. But at the end of the day, it's a seller's decision. I'm only an advisor, just showing the data. So price your home based on the market. And also, to support that, if you feel like, well, maybe I can push it, get an appraisal. As a seller owner, you can get an appraisal on your home yourself, so you can kind of check what is the realtor is telling me this is what my home worth. What is an appraiser telling me? Because guess what? Most buyers are going to have a loan, and that lender is going to require an appraisal. You might get lucky and get an all cash deal with no contingencies. That would be great. But I would say get an appraisal that would help you really support what you want to sell your house for.
Can you educate the seller on what's the difference between a all cash deal? Like, what are the benefits between an all cash deal as a listing agent for you and to the seller versus a buyer who is coming with home financing? Like, what are the differences and like the pros and cons of the two?
Yeah, so I hear this question all the time from buyers when they're competing with an all cash deal, and from sellers also when they're trying to figure out which one to take.
Yeah.
From a seller standpoint, every offer is really all cash because the seller is going to get all of the money at one time, right? The lender
Right.
is going to give them the cash at settlement.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at it, the advantages really comes down to, are there contingencies? Because an all cash deal can have contingencies also. There could be an all cash deal that says it's contingent upon an appraisal still. I want to make sure that I'm paying the fair market value for this home and not overpaying. So the difference is an all cash can remove all contingencies. They can say, no, well, one, there's no financing contingency. So that's off top, but there still could be an appraisal, but they could waive the appraisal. They could waive the home inspection as well with an all cash. So you could essentially have an all cash deal that waives everything, and that kind of relieves any little hiccups that could happen, right? You could say, okay, this is a clean, this is the price. We go to settlement in 15 days in some instances or less, and I'm done, really quick. Whereas financing, there's a couple more hoops you got to jump through.
Yeah.
Whether if it's an FHA, there has to be some type of inspection when it comes to an FHA or VA loan, right?
Yep.
So there may be things you have to correct because of that inspection. If it's a conventional loan, there could still be a home inspection that the buyer may want. So there could be things you have to correct, or maybe give
especially these days. Yeah, they're not waiving as much. Yeah.
Yep. Or give a credit to the buyer to address certain issues. And then it comes down to the financing contingency. If that buyer, for whatever reason, the financing doesn't get approved, that gets them out of the deal, and now you have to put your property back on the market and find another buyer.
Which kind of sits on like the quality of the lender and the loan officer, right? Because how thorough they are during the initial process. If they weren't, then there's going to be surprises that you weren't aware of at the time. And versus, I guess, an all cash offers, all you have to see is probably a financial statement, a bank statement or something, or an asset sheet to say, like, what are you going to use to buy this home, and then from there, that's your underwriting right there, right?
Yeah, exactly. With the all cash deal, it's going to be proof of funds. Do you have the funds, the amount to purchase this home? But what I've noticed with all cash offers, a lot of times they're usually below the asking price because they're all cash, because there's less risk, and so that's one.
So how do you navigate the seller then? Like, hey, are you willing to go below for an all cash, which is a little bit more certain versus because it's hitting your commission too, right?
It is, yeah.
So how are you navigating them through that decision process?
It's interesting that you brought up commission. So one thing about me, and I can only speak for myself, I don't look at a deal based on the commission. It depends on if I'm representing the seller or buyer. If I'm representing the seller, I'm trying to get them the most money possible. So if I'm looking at two deals, whether it's a cash or a loan, I want to possibly go with the loan because it's more money in the seller's pocket. If it's higher, if it's a higher offer, it's more money in their pocket. But I also want to, I can reach out to the lender and see, is the buyer well qualified? There's a pre-approval, but where are they in the phase? Have they filled out an actual application? So we can kind of get a sense how strong that pre-approval letter is.
Right.
And if I feel confident about it, then I will advise them to go with the loan that is a higher offer amount because it puts more money in their pocket.
I want to bring you back to that pre-approval. So rather than a lender talking about it, can you share, you said the quality of the pre-approval. What do you mean by that? Because it was new to me. I thought it was standard practice when I opened up shop that everybody should be thorough and pre-underwrite and get a full application, review all the documents before you go through. But I've learned that that's not the case. That's not standard practice in this industry. So what do you mean by quality?
So I guess it really depends on, I can't really talk about how some lenders pre-approve individuals. I know there's supposed to be a standard way of, okay, this is a pre-approval, this is a pre-qualified, but essentially it comes down to someone giving their social security number, maybe their income, maybe their debts or something like that. And then a lender will say, okay, based on this information this preliminary information that you filled out, they haven't done a full loan application, but based on this, we can approve you for this amount, pre-approve you for this amount, which is great. But they haven't done the full loan application. Some lenders that I work with actually have individuals do a full loan application.
Yeah.
So that way, they can see, is there anything that might come up in underwriting that we have to address to really approve them for a higher amount per se.
That's how we approached it, because the last thing we wanted to do, frankly speaking, was piss off all the realtors, like with surprises that we should have known it in advance, right? Like entering into this industry, I've heard stories of realtors saying, like we were in the middle of the loan process, and it's like, how come they didn't know this happened or that happened? Like, how is that possible? And me coming from more of a corporate America operational background, like there is a fix for that. You just do the full application at the beginning. You look at the guidelines for whatever loan product you're suggesting. You review and underwrite that file yourself against it, find out all the things that's going to be triggering red flags, solve it before you even find a home, send it to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, get it DU approved or whatever you need to, and then there you go. You have an actual pre-approval. And I think the pre-approval, that for me, the way we operate, the pre is, all it means is the loan hasn't closed yet, but everything else is done. And I think that's how I've always wanted, because I took the approach kind of similar to how you entered the business, when you're like, hey, I've bought a home, this was an experience I received. And I think a lot of good realtors or lenders go through that, right? It's like, that's how I received it. Oh, I could have done it so much better, so let me go be that person and fix the whole process. For me, it was kind of the same thing. I'm like, I would have loved to known all the audibles that you're going to ask me to do as you go through the process, whatever it is, like updated bank statements, updated pay whatever. Like, tell me in advance so I'm ready for it, because it's like we're all busy people before we were doing this as whatever profession we're doing. So that was the whole goal, was like prep them. And I tell every client, I'm like, I'm going to ask you to do a lot of work in the beginning, but it's because, I don't know about you, but I don't like surprises as we go through this process. The last thing I want you to do is a week before thinking you're going to buy this home, and then no, you're still renting, or no, you still have to pay an extra, like, you don't want that. And so that's the whole goal motivation for me, was because I was moving from California to here. My lease was done, and I needed my loan to be done to move here and have full confidence in it. But I'm like, oh my God, I got moving trucks ready, all this money spent to go cross country. And I'm like, you're asking me for what, 5 days before closing? Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, it's nothing hard, but it's like, it's just that anxiety is building. I was like, oh my God, is the loan okay? And it's just the last thing I want for anybody to experience, because I hated that anxious feeling that I was going through.
And that's one of the reasons why I liked working with you on the deal that we worked on, because when I've been in the business for a long time, like I said, since 2007, right? And so I've worked with so many different lenders, and a buyer has their choice. They can choose whatever lender they want to work with, and that's fine. But as a realtor, once you identify certain lenders that are on point and they're going to provide excellent service to your client, you want to work with them over and over, because it helps get the deal done, and it also helps make the transaction smooth. And at the end of the day, we want the transaction to be as smooth as possible. Are there going to be some things on the back end that we're working on to fix? Of course, but we want to go as smooth as possible. And so I know that our transaction was was super smooth, super
Yeah.
quick. And so, kudos to you for that. So that's
Thank
why
you.
we do have preferred lenders that we work with. And we let our clients know, hey, here's someone we recommend, but of course you can use whoever you want. And we hope that they would, see the value in that.
That you bring up a good point about that preferred lenders, because I mean that was another new thing, like preferred realtors. I have a reason why we have preferred realtors, and I'll share it after you share. Like, I want to ask you, like, what does it mean? What's the criteria of a preferred lender? Why do you recommend? Because like, I think a lot of clients, buyers will think like, oh, you must be getting a kickback, you must be getting some form of a benefit because you're preferring this person or that person, like, and you and I know we don't get kickback. It's highly illegal.
Yep.
We get audited so stringently, it's just crazy. But why can you share to the audience, like, why do you recommend a preferred lender of X, Y, and Z depending on the situation? Like, why?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I look at it this way. Yeah, we definitely don't get any kickbacks. I make sure I let my clients know there's no benefit financially for you to work with one of the lenders that I recommend. But what it comes down to is, one, it's been great experience working with these lenders, and I know that they're going to either try to get them the best interest rate, because from the big picture, the interest rates for a lot of lenders are going to be around the same, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But there could be certain fees that help the buyer save money. And so I let them know, look, you can check with 3 lenders or more to see who's going to give you the best deal, the best mortgage payment. When you think about a 30-year mortgage, right? You don't want to pay more over 30 years. That's going to hurt you. But also what fees are you going to be paying up front where you could save money with another lender? So a buyer has to think sometimes of keeping more cash now in their pocket, and maybe having a little bit higher mortgage payment, or maybe paying a little bit more cash and then having a lower mortgage payment over the time. So, and that's why what makes the lenders that I work with great is, are they really fighting to get my client a good interest rate, and really being honest and fair with them about, hey, I can't beat that other lender, you should work with them. And so that's been my thing, is there's a couple lenders I work with, they're so upfront and honest and let you know that lender has a great rate, you need to go with them. They don't try to convince you to stay with them even though they know they don't have the better product. And so, and then also the communication. I tell you this, working with some big banks, I'm not going to name any names, working with some of the big banks, because I work with a lot of the big banks, not going to name any names, it's hard to get in touch with someone. You call a number, you're on hold, hit 1, hit 2, whatever, and you're waiting to get in touch with someone. And even if they do have someone that you're working with, even getting in touch with that person, it still can take some time. Versus working with someone like yourself, I can shoot you a text message, you respond quickly. I can shoot you an email, I can call you, and there's no necessarily set hours. Obviously, I want to respect your time, so I don't try to, call you super late at night. But if I need to,
if we have a deal for the client, we got to do what we can.
Exactly, and that's how I operate. Like, my clients hit me up sometimes at 8 at night, 9 at night. We're trying to work on something that we need to get this ratified or whatever the case. So I work odd different hours, and I kind of like my lenders to do the same. And so that's one of the reasons why working with you is great, because I can get in touch with you and not, I got to sit on hold for a while, or all right, let me see how long it takes.
It's like the banks and the credit unions. I mean, there are exceptions, right, to everything, but I think that's what I've been hearing too, is like, in general, it has been hard, like, especially when deals are always being done on weekends and they're not available on weekends. And that's, I think, what I hear the most frustrating thing is, like, it's a Saturday, Sunday, writing the offer and need to talk with the lender to make sure, like, can we do this? Can we do that? And it's like, can't get a hold of them. And I heard that's been the most frustrating thing, because that could potentially put the buyer's offer in jeopardy, right? Because if you don't know because the last thing you want to do is put an offer in that's not viable. Like, oh, you need to go up in price, or maybe you need to shrink the down payment or increase the down payment, whatever it is. So I do hear that. I think, in terms of like for us, it's kind of similar. We want a realtor that's fighting for our clients, but it's like one side is definitely negotiations, right? Because realtors are professional negotiators. There's a reason why you want to hire somebody, because this is what they do all the time, is they negotiate day in and day out for that price for years on end for their clients. That's number one. And then number two, it's kind of similar, lender versus realtor, is the patience to educate that client. Like, I know certain realtors, they're not as patient in educating, walking them through the process, especially for a first-time home buyer. For you, I know that you are like uber patient with the clients. With a client that we went through, she was trying to figure some stuff out, and she was like, man, Lonnie is so great. When I talk to him, like, he's just walking me through the process on like how to do this in the DC market, and kind of giving her some tips and tricks on how to like kind of think through the whole process. And so I think those are kind of the two biggest components, because some buyers like me, I mean, I had to fly here twice to look at homes, and in the 2 days that I flew in, I looked at like 27 homes. So patience is key for buyers, because I know not all realtors want to drive somebody around, even if they're flying from California, to show them 27 homes across 2 days. But I think those are the two main things that I'm looking for. Is I think it's kind of does our ethics and moral values kind of equal to each other, right? It's like the patience for our clients, the fighting for them, as well as, I think one thing that a lot of folks really underestimate is the availability that you brought up. Because like when you have a question, the patience and fighting for them, it's going to lead to something, which is you want to reach out to that person because you built a trust bond with them. And it's like, are they available to speak to you, or are they kind of like pushing it aside because they don't want to talk about whatever taboo topic it is? Like, because one thing that frustrates me about our industry is real estate, realtors, it's transparent how much you guys earn. It's out there. But for lenders, the frustrating part is it's not transparent. And so when I try to make it transparent, they're like, they're either thinking it's either too high, or I don't believe you because it's too low. I get some of those too, because we're not the most expensive. We're not the lowest either. But we're kind of like, if there was a middle, we're kind of below that. But it's all goes back to, we want to be fair for the clients, because I don't believe lenders should be making 4.5% on a deal. That it's just preposterous. But I think it's like comparable to what realtors are earning, and that goes to show with like what we're putting in, right? Like all the hours that we go into it. So one thing I want to kind of pivot to is more on the buyer's side. Can you educate to buyers, like, what do you do when you are packaging an offer? Because I think something that a lot of buyers don't understand. Yes, they understand you are providing comps and providing like listings and stuff like that to them for them to look at, negotiating for them. But I know that you put in a lot of hours to draft up the offers and figure out all the addendums and all that stuff. Like, can you educate the buyers, like the amount of work that goes into that? Because it's not a little. It's definitely, I mean, it's probably more streamlined because you've done it for a while, but it's still a ton of work to make sure that contract is strong and pat. So can you share with the buyers, like, what you really do? Because they just think like, show me open houses, I want to walk in, I want to put an offer in. And it's like, what's taking so long?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'm gonna talk about that, and also go back really quick on something that you had mentioned. It's all actually ties together. So we show properties a lot of times on the weekend, right? And if there has to be an adjustment to the pre-approval letter, because maybe they're pre-approved at a lower amount, but they can go up a little bit, and so we got that initial letter. We have to reach out to the lender to say, hey, we need a new letter, because with this offer that we're trying to submit on a Sunday, we need to let the seller know that we can go up, right?
Yeah,
And so one of the things, packaging an offer, once a buyer decides this is the property I want to submit an offer, now I have to go and prepare everything knowing, okay, they're pre-approved for a lower amount. Let me reach out to the lender, get a new pre-approval letter. And so if I don't have access to a lender because, they don't work on the weekend, we got to wait till Monday. So again, working with you, that's one of the great things. We can get that new letter. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. I'm also going to gather intel, this is what I call it, from the listing agent, as much intel as the listing agent will provide about how I can negotiate. Try to find out, is there any room to negotiate on the price? Is the seller willing to give any type of credit? Is there any items that maybe I can, see if the seller will be willing to fix before we do the home inspection? Because I know in most purchases, when it's a resale, not new construction, there's going to be things that's going to come up in a home inspection. So I'm trying to get all of that information along with the comparables so that we can make the best offer that's going to win, but also get the best deal for my buyer.
Are you buying coffee for the listing agent? What are you doing to extract that information, that intel? What are you doing?
No, it's just treating people with respect. When I talk to them, it's, you have kind of a spectrum of how real estate agents treat each other. Some are very to the point, business, business, business. I need this, I need that, tell me this, tell me that. But it really just comes down to respect. I'm a friendly person, at least I feel like, I smile a lot and that's just my personality. So I don't know, maybe that helps me when dealing with agents, because one of the things that I always hear, it may sound like I'm tooting my horn, but this is what people tell me, other real estate agents say, wow, it was such a pleasure working with you. And so it just comes down to treating people with respect. And so when you do that, I think it makes other real estate agents, be forthcoming with information that they can be. Obviously, they're not going to, tell me things that they can't.
Yeah.
But you never know unless
because there's an ethics code that you guys abide by.
Exactly. They have a fiduciary duty to their client, so they're not going to disclose certain things, which is understandable. But there's certain things that they can let me know when it comes down to, how can we structure our offer to make sure that it's a win-win situation, because that's what it comes down to. Is it should be a win-win situation.
I concur with the folks that says you're friendly. I think you're super amicable, super likable. Seeing the spectrum of the folks that I work with across country, it's the realtor that has that strong likability factor. I think because they are able to get some form of information out of that person, the listing agent, and I think also the experience in translating and interpreting secret code, like, wink wink, we can't do this, but maybe if it was like this, and then you're like, okay, I understand what you're saying. And that, I think that's the difference between a very good real estate agent and one that's kind of a little bit underperforming, is they have very strong intuition when speaking with the listing agent or the buying agent, but also just a very strong likability factor. And I think that's one of the things that buyers have to look out for. If they came to me, to a lender, and said, hey, do you have any realtors, or they asked me, like, what's one of the reasons why you're preferring or referring somebody to me, and it's because it's like they're highly likable, and that's an asset. That's an asset. It's not a characteristic, because that person is representing you as they're going around looking at homes, negotiating. You want to make sure this person is likable when they're putting that offer in with their face, with their email and their voice. And that's the thing. You got to, call them, definitely, meet them in person, but it's, do you like them? Because that's your representative. And I think that's key for me, because when I used to do these like personality tests, we found out, like, doctors predominantly they're not very likable in the patient room, and the personality test, like the professor was like, yeah, it's because their personality trait is very analytical. Think about it. They're in books all the time. They do this all the time. So like their leading trait is not being extrovert and being likable. It's like, can I diagnose this situation correctly? You know, whereas like for realtors, you're out in the open, you're talking a lot. So like the likability is very strong. I think the best combination is when the likability factor is strong, but then you're also very analytical because you have to draft up all these legal contracts and documents for the offer. And so that when those two traits or assets are combined, that's when I think you guys are just, you know, that's when you see like the top one of the 1% performing, is because you have both of those traits, and you're, you know, and that's a huge asset for the buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And thank you for the compliment.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, just, you know, just to round off this this conversation, because I've been thoroughly enjoying it, is like, what's one big tip that you would want to provide to buyers and to sellers? Because it's not, I feel like it's not a seller's market as strongly as it was for sure the first half of this year and the late half of last year. It is slowly turning into a buyer's market, or more even a balanced market. Maybe even that's what it is. So what's one tip that you would kind of like, if you had one advice that every buyer, every seller that's coming to you or that's considering you, like, what would you coach them on?
So for a buyer, I would give them the tip of, because the market is shifting, I've noticed that some buyers think that they may have the advantage, especially if a property's been sitting on the market for 60, 90 days or longer. They think, okay, I like this one, but let me see what other options I have. My tip would be, if you see a property that you like and it checks, you know, all of the boxes or almost all of the boxes, you should act on it and not wait, because that property, even though it's been on the market a year, could slip away with you delaying. And so I would say, you know, once you have identified the area you want to be in, the price that works with your mortgage payment from, you know, talking to your lender, then, you know, you now can kind of really start to zero in on the property you want. And so don't think, well, I have time, there's other options, there's not, it's not a crazy market like before. Find that property and act on it, make that offer.
I feel like buyers might think that you might be like selfish on yourself to push them like, hey, you need to buy this, but that's really not the case, right?
No, not the case at all. And that's the thing, is I make sure my buyers are comfortable. It's all about checking the boxes. And so that's one of the things when I was working with one of my buyers recently, and that was one of the things that he said, when I was explaining it to him, he understood. He said, no, I understand exactly what you're saying, because I was thinking I had this time, and it's a situation kind of similar to yours, where this buyer is from out of town, actually living here like during the week, but going to be, you know, buying a place to kind of be here during the week. And so he's not available all the time to see, because it has to be when he's in town, right? So that's one of the things that he realized. He said, yeah, no, you're explaining it to me in a good way, so I understand that I can't, you know, see a property I like and then come back to it later because it may be gone. And so that's in our first offer. That's kind of what happened, is he saw this property and was like, well, I'll wait to see it on Monday when I come in town, right? And I said, okay, just to let you know, if you want me to do a virtual tour, I can do a virtual tour, so at least you can see it, even though real estate agents put virtual tours online, but it's when I go to the property and I can put eyes on it for them, and I can do video or FaceTime them, it's better. And so I'll go to the property, I'll let them know, hey, I'll go to the property, we can FaceTime, look at it, ask questions while I'm there, and that way you can make a decision before someone else possibly puts in an offer. You know, at least it gives you the option. And so he said, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do that, right? So I go to the property, do the FaceTime, looking at it, he's asking questions, showing the amenities and everything. It checks all the boxes, and he said, you know, it checks all the boxes, you make a great point. Well, guess what happened? The real estate agent informed me that they had a verbal offer. So not written yet. So I let my client know. I said, hey, I know you wanted to wait till Monday. We did the virtual tour. You wanted to wait till Monday to see it yourself also. But they do have a verbal offer. They're expecting a written offer. Let me know what you want to do. There's no pressure, but I just want you to be informed and have all of the data. With that, he was like, you know what? Great point. Let's go ahead and put in an offer. And so with that, now there's two competing offers because a written offer did come in. And even though we thought we had, because I got that intel I needed to get when talking to the agent, so I told him it's going to be a strong offer. We got to come in above if you really want it, but only if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
He was, and we still lost it. But the thing is that when you also talked about things that I do to kind of prepare the buyer, prepare the offer, before I even saw the virtual tour, I told the agent, if you get an offer, let me know so that at least I can let my client know to see if he can make a decision before he puts eyes on it. And so that agent reached back out to me to let me know. Had I not done that and said, okay, we're going to see this property on Monday, the agent never would have known to reach out to me, right? So there's
so you're saying that's not standard practice to let each other know?
No. Well, one, how would she know? If I just if I'm sending my agent, my buyer 5 properties, and he's like, I want to look at this one and this one. The agent may not know that, you know, that my client is interested enough, right? So it takes me reaching out to the agent and say, hey, I'm planning to see your property on Monday, but if you get an offer before then, please let me know so that I can let my client know to see if he wants to submit an offer before then. So those are things that I do to go above and beyond. And I don't pressure my clients, but I want them to have the information so they can decide if that's something they want to do.
That's great because you're proactively thinking on behalf of the client and their emotional reaction if something happens to a said property that they might be interested in. And that's what I'm telling everybody here is like that those little things of having high EQ, being proactive is what really differentiates people like Lonnie. I mean, it's just, and that's why folks, if you're looking for a realtor in DC and VA, you got to go with Lonnie because, I mean, he's so proactive and just considering and just thinking about the client. So that's a great tip. I mean, I think, you know, that advice of if you find something, just put an offer in. Obviously, you have to be comfortable with it, but put an offer in because you just never know because it's not buyer advantage. Like it's not leaning all the way to the buyer side right now. It's still pretty balanced to what Lonnie is saying. So thanks for that tip. How about for the sellers? Like what's that one advice just to help them, I guess, manage their expectation and emotions, right? Like what's one thing that you would coach them on?
So for the seller, essentially you have to think about a situation of you still might get multiple offers. And even if you don't get multiple offers, try to listen to the agent because the agent, we are not emotional in the transaction, right? We're looking at the transaction to give you the best deal, best opportunity to sell your property. And so even though you may feel like an offer is low, I'll say this. Most of the time, the first offer you get is the best offer. Most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And so some sellers, what I've seen is they get that first offer and maybe it's not exactly the amount they want. And so they want to wait. Well, waiting could bring in more offers or it could make that buyer withdraw their offer and see another property they like better. And now we're kind of, you know, we've lost that opportunity, right? I've been in that situation. And when we get the second offer, it may be lower than the first, right? And so now you're kicking yourself like, I had that offer that was, you know, maybe it was only 5,000 less than I wanted, and I was, you know, trying to get this amount. So that's my advice I would give is just listen to your agent. They are going to have, you know, your best interest in mind. And at the end of the day, you know, they want to make sure that you're happy, you know, with the transaction. So that's kind of the best advice I can give to a seller.
Last thing that I want to ask, actually, pick your brain on is when they're, and just in a couple of minutes, because I know we're running into our time, is when they're looking to find a realtor, like what's that one or two criterias? I know it probably is a little different for buyer and seller, right? But it's like, what's that, when they're interviewing them, you know, talking to them, what's the one few things that they should be honing in on? Like, do they have these assets? Like, what would you say? Like, if you were looking for a realtor, you being a realtor, trying to buy a home in a state that you're not licensed in, okay? Like, what are you looking for?
That's a great question. You know, it's really interesting because I help people buy properties all over the United States.
Okay.
I have people that reach out to me to say, hey, I'm going to buy a property in Dallas, Texas. It's funny because I actually had someone call me from Google. They Googled an agent and they happened to put Arlington, and they were looking in Arlington, Texas. But I don't think they specified Arlington, Texas. And so I came up Arlington, right? Realtor in Arlington. And so this guy reached out to me, called me straight from Google, and I'm talking to him. And then once he realized, oh, wait, you're in Arlington, Virginia, I'm looking at Arlington, Texas. And I'm like, well, I still can help you because that's my specialty. I connect people with agents all over. And so I actually will interview agents for people and then decide if this agent will be a good fit based on the criteria that I have for myself, the expectations that I have for myself that I give clients, right? Someone that's going to be responsive, someone that's going to be proactive, and someone that's going to have patience and really listen to the needs of the buyer. And so those are the things that I would say for a buyer. What do you look for is an agent that is going to listen to you, be proactive, and fight for you to essentially make sure that you get the best deal on that property. And so I've connected people from whether it be Dallas, California, New Orleans, Atlanta, you know, everywhere. That's what I do. I actually get a lot of referrals throughout the year and help people, you know, outside of the DC area as well. So if you're looking for an agent, whether it's in DC and VA or anywhere, reach out to me and I'll definitely help you.
Awesome. So thanks, Lonnie, for just your time today. Man, it was just so much fun. I mean, an hour blew by. Like I said, it was going to be a lot of fun to do this. I'm going to leave Lonnie's contact information below this video in the description below. So check him out. Is it okay if I leave your phone number as well so that they can text you if they have any questions?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to leave his phone number, his website, as well as his email address. So if you're looking to buy a home in DC or Virginia in the Nova area, because I don't think he'll go all the way down to Richmond. So check him out. And then, yeah, Lonnie, thanks again so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. It's been a pleasure.